Welcome, everybody. That is actually the call used right now in England for it's called "Gone Away," when the fox breaks cover and begins to run. So the dogs go into a frenzy because, right, that they're running open, and that's to signal everyone spread out in the hunt that it's time to begin. So we will begin. When I was a freshman back in the late Neolithic, I had a great thick volume of English literature I was supposed to become familiar with. And one of the lines I remember from it is, "Whoso list to hunt, I know where there is an hind." Very famous quotation from English poetry. And I think that's a good place to step in because, first of all, there's a desire to hunt in the Middle Ages, really in all status levels. And it also tells you that it's not random, because we'll be speaking quite a bit about elite hunting. I'll explain why in a moment. But it is targeted. I know where there is an hind. A hind is a female of the red deer that we'll be showing in a moment. But I want to do some introductory work first, because we're going into an unknown world, and that was one of the reasons to blow the horn, right? The sound that takes you into a different spiritual or intellectual realm. And we're going into a world where ownership and what you are supposed to do in your life is defined very, very differently than it is for us. On the land, and we'll be speaking a lot about land use, the use of space, there is a difference between owners and users. So there are people who own land, but then there are the people who work it at different levels. So even today in Scotland, where I travel fairly often for work and bring students, a farmer is not what we think of as a farmer here. A farmer doesn't own his land typically. Someone else does, and the farmer is the tenant. And that's the world we're going into. So we have kings, which often try and claim that they own everything. We have aristocrats who claim they own everything. Then we've got gentry who may have rights going back further. And then we have all the different common people. And at the top level, going all the way down to the gentry, these things might be formalized. By the time of the Renaissance, they are typically in writing. And so you, for example, are whatever title you might have of Lauderdale County. However, you know, neither do you delve or do you spin. You have people for that. They, however, are below the level of honor and below the level of written agreements. Their entire world is a world of custom. They live according to customary village law. They live according to customary weights and measures. One of my favorite from medieval England, really all the way into the 18th century, is a place where the geologically there are lots of almost like miniature rugby-shaped stones that occur. That's the pound. So, you know, when you want to buy or sell something, you know, you bring your stone with you and you go off. That's their world. And so their perception, the second part of what we'll be talking about, is entirely different. They, again, wonderful expression from English common law, time out of mind, have harvested animals, taken fish, entered the forests for what's called verdure, anything produced by growing, And they see that as their right. Nothing's written down, but time out of mind, they have done that. So we're going to be talking about the blend of all of these things and talking about game getting, hunting as part of a very dense network of social relations, not just relations of humans to animals, humans to land, but relationships between individuals and groups of people played out on that field. So let's, if I can find a little clicker, here we go. First, we're going to go to the animals. And these are, I've had some wonderful assistance getting these prints from a whole variety of medieval sources. This is the heart, right? See the horns, the heart. And this is an hind, right? The female, as represented. And here is what the red deer actually looks like as an adult stag. Often called stags in Europe, red deer or elk. If you see this in Eastern Europe or in Germany or in Scandinavia, you'll see this referred to as the elk. So they have a different word for moose, right, than we do. You know, these are actually, anyway, these are their equivalent of elk. I'm sorry, I've got the words crossed up there. I apologize. In any case, this is a very big animal, probably like this at the withers. Very, very large, can be very, very aggressive. I, many years ago, spent 2 weeks camping in northeastern Poland where they were making an attempt to somehow domesticate these, raise them in selective breeding, make them an animal that could be controlled. Unfortunately, that didn't work very well. And their antlers tended to get like one big spear, and one of the fellows had been transfixed by it, by one of these. Yeah, domestication just was not their place in the universe. They are still distributed from Scotland all the way up into Scandinavia. This is the roe deer, characteristically with these little forked horns. This one is in velvet. This is actually a pretty small animal. I've seen them in Eastern Europe. They're maybe that size. And then the fallow deer, which are also, again, widespread. Particularly, we're going to be focusing on England for a couple of reasons. One is I'm a historian, and there are more sources about England commonly available than for other places. There's a lot of literature out there for France and Germany as well in the late medieval and Renaissance period. But my old French is not the greatest. Neither is my old German at this point. And simply because we're an Anglophone country, more things have been posted about all of this. So these are the 3 deer that are the object of, I would say, the majority of elite hunting in England. And so the process of doing this is very ritualized. The first thing that happens is whoever is the owner or the power declares there shall be an hunt. And the huntsmen go out, and they are on duty all the time. In fact, in the theory of policing and control of land, one of the ideas is that it begins with game management, because the huntsmen on all of these lands are the first people to regularly patrol land with a certificate of authority to arrest and bring people in for transgressions. If you know the background of English common law, that's not the way it works for many, many centuries. I have to have a complaint against you. I go to the sheriff. He accepts my complaint or not, right? You get called in. It's not something where there are people patrolling in any form. So this is, then that's followed, once the animals are identified, that is followed by a hunt breakfast. Now here you can see that they are not sparing themselves, right? They're drinking wine. They're not sure what that is almost, but they are enjoying themselves. And over here you see one of the most important things. This is the huntsman, right? The chief hunter, the forester. And you see this fellow is pouring little pellets. Those are the fumes or the fuments. And they, I don't know that I'd want to blow my horn after that. They're carried in your hunting horn. They are the droppings of the deer. So your first job as one of these patrollers, right, going out is to find droppings of deer, put them in your horn, stuff some moss or grass in there so it doesn't fall out, bring it to the hunt breakfast, and in some portrayals, they're actually pouring it out on the table. A little bit different perception of what we do with what comes out of the animal last, but it fascinates me because this is actually something I was taught by my father. Animal poo, how new is it? What was the animal eating? And this is one of the ways that they're identifying which animal they should hunt. And here, even more impressively, if you remember 4 and 20 blackbirds, wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the queen? This is Queen Elizabeth, and she is being presented with deer poop because she is the queen of this hunt. And so they are bringing her the poop, tastefully displayed on fresh leaves. So she, right, ostensibly is helping make the decision about which animal to hunt, because it's not random, right? Whoso lists to hunt, you know, I know where there is in hind. They know where this pile of fumes or fumes came from, and that's where they'll take the dogs. And that's where they will begin running the dogs, because this kind of hunt typically involves dogs. Now from here, it can go in a number of directions. One is what we can call a free hunt, right? That the dogs are turned loose, they run wherever they're going to go. People follow on foot or on horseback until the animal is bayed. We can understand that, but there are things that are very strange for us. For someone like Queen Elizabeth, there might have been nets set up, great long lines of nets. And men and dogs might have been used to drive the deer up against these wing nets into a large enclosure or into a chute where they would all have to run by within just a few yards of, for example, the queen or her ladies waiting, and they would have their crossbows or their bows, and you know, there would be a deer as far away as the chairs are, and you would simply shoot them. It was not, you know, our idea of stalking, fair chase, all of these things simply didn't obtain. And the kills could be in the dozens of animals. Dozens of deer could be killed. Again, sometimes they were detained in a relatively small enclosure for a period of time for, again, those who were not vigorous enough to actually follow a true hunt could kill their animals. Now, here we go to the dogs. This is only one of many slides that are available, or many pictures that are available of medieval hunting dogs. These are what are called running hounds. And the packs were divided in a number of different hounds, gaze hounds, in other words, greyhounds, and others that hunted with their eyes, didn't have good noses. These are trailing hounds that hunt with their noses. And then there were mastiffs, very, very large, what would be called strike dogs in the 20th century. These are fighting dogs. These are the dogs that attack the animal when you get there. They really can't smell very well. They don't have a great vision, but they get there and they attack the animal and hold it still. Dogs take a lot of care. That's why I selected this. It's a tremendous investment in time and knowledge to care for these big packs of animals. Here you see them being bandaged, dosed, all of the different things you need to take care of these hunting dogs. Because, of course, they're always getting injured. Right? Remember that, get the horn right through you. You can get stepped on, you can get gored, all of these different things. And then, this is a very famous image. There are a whole series of images of women hunting. Again, as we pointed out with Queen Elizabeth and her ladies in waiting, that might be in an enclosure. This is an open hunt, and her dog has assailed the deer, slowed him down enough that she has put an arrow in the back of his neck, and she will have her venison. Then also there is stalking, and this is, since it comes into our contemporary language, now you'll know what a stalking horse is when you next use this expression. This is a stalking horse. You can use a real horse, but here it's just a wooden figure, a framework with some cloth, possibly an animal skin over the top, so that from a distance it just looks like an animal moving, and you sort of move it in front of you until you're close enough. And as you can see, then you shoot the animal, in this case with a crossbow. You can also see, right, that he's clad in colors that are going to blend in. That's part of what's going on here. This is something that I've actually observed in Scotland, contemporary Scotland, on my trips. They hunt the red deer high up in the moor, right? That's part of what they do. These estates make their money off of that. Very, very expensive. People come from all over the world to do it. But the huntsmen demonstratively drive around the villages in their camouflage, in their Land Rovers, right, as an elite of the stalkers. Right, it means a little different, you don't get put in jail for it. Then, if you are successful, then the deer is shared out. And we need to talk a little bit about how that success taking the deer finally happens. You saw the crossbow, you saw the woman hunter very daintily loosing her shafts at the deer. But it was considered more manly to do things differently. And I don't have all the hardware here. For example, in France through the 20th century, in medieval and Renaissance England, the first hunter, in other words, the first elite person to arrive on horseback, was responsible for dispatching that enormous animal with big horns. It may be a female. They actually killed fawns. They killed females. They were not all that selective. But of course, the greatest achievement was you confront this 1,000-pound animal with enormous horns. You're supposed to leap from your saddle, draw your hunting knife, and fight it out with this animal, killing him. Now, if all is well, right, the dogs are restraining the animal so you can approach him and stab him. Spears were also used. This is, again, the arcana of ancient weapons. Spears you thrust with but hold on to. Javelins you throw. Often crossover weapons were carried, stout enough to thrust with but light enough to throw from a little bit of distance. And then you have the deer is down, and the minions begin to cut it up, and it's distributed according to a very, very established protocol of who gets what part. Right? And again, it's all connected with status, with whose forest it is, all of those elements. And then you may have a procession returning back to your stately home. Right? Here is the skin. Here is the entire dead animal, in this case, being carried on a litter of oak, very, very important, of oak branches, oak being sacred in Germanic tradition. There are layers upon layers upon layers in all of this. So now you've seen what happens at the top of the world, and it probably sounds very orderly. It sounds like medieval legends you've heard about, maybe even movies that you've seen where this is reenacted. But a lot of other things are going on here. And one of the ways to understand this comes out of theories about medieval thinking, medieval being. The idea of inversion of an order of being and an opposite order of being as celebrated in different ritual performances. So in the Middle Ages, you have what we might call the realm of rule, right? Things are orderly. And then you have misrule. And so during festivals, you have lords of misrule, of inversion. Things are opposite. This survives in England today still as Boxing Day, right? When the servants are the ones who get presents and take over things for a little while. So we have seen the orderly world of rule. But underneath this is a seething world of conflict and misrule. Because in England, at least, we're using England as our example, something is discernible that begins in the late Middle Ages, high Middle Ages across Europe, and that is kings decide they want to be kings. They actually want to have the supposed royal authority that they've been given. They want to collect taxes. They want to do all of these things, have their own armies. And the nobles are having none of it because they've had those rights going back to really about the time of the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, around 500 AD. Their titles, to the degree that they exist, their power, their rights, come all the way from Germanic hunting bands to previous authority that they have to simply being the meanest people in their county and forcing all the farmers to submit to them. It's a combination of all of this. But these people are very uninterested in having some king tell them what to do. So in England, 1066, the man affectionately known as the Bastard invades and takes over, right? And he decides he's going to have royal forests. He's going to decree that the countryside, particularly the less settled forested countryside, is now going to be royal forest, and he will have all the rights. Well, again, these people are having none of it. And so they proceed to continue to hunt openly to this level, 20, 30, 40 men with hounds, with horns, with horses. They are going to hunt those forests, and he can do nothing about it. This persists till the reign of James I Stuart, a mere 600 years later. Right? And what it shows is that the nobility, all the way from the aristocracy down to the gentry, are simply not willing to submit to royal authority. And they can't go up against the king. Well, I mean, in 1215 they can, right? They force King John back on his haunches with the Magna Carta. But the ability to actually challenge royal authority at the top is very, very limited. There's only several outbreaks of that. But a day-to-day thing, let's go out and kill 20 of the king's deer. You can probably get away with that. And not only do they kill them, and they actually have, again, using the discussion model that we're using today, banquets of misrule to show that they have succeeded at stealing the king's deer. They're having a good time with it, and no one is going to prosecute them for it. So this deer is going back to the stately home where they will drink heavily, they will consume venison, and they will thumb their noses at whoever the next person in the hierarchy is. Or the king is so out of control that these people are either maintaining their own forests or have staked out turf within the royal forests and are going into each other's turf and stealing each other's deer. This is part of what I would think of as like a guerrilla warfare in the countryside between elite families. Well, I can steal your deer. No, I can steal more of your deer. Because, see, if you began killing each other in open warfare, then the king's going to get involved. And he was probably going to be able to find enough people that don't like you that more people will be brought in and your whole world may be crushed. But steal a few deer here, beat up a few gamekeepers, kill a couple of dogs, you can probably get away with that pushing and shoving back and forth. It sounds an awful lot like feuding in the Appalachians, and it's very much akin to that. There is no higher authority that's going to step in and do very much, so the notable families are fighting it out at that level. And again, it is continuous. Now, what's really interesting is that to some degree, this was seen, again, using some theoretical ideas about medieval life, as cathartic, as carnival or other misrule events are interpreted. This allows breaking the rules without breaking the system. Where that begins to change is when absolute private property starts to develop in the 1600s. Because then it's stealing. Whereas here it's just a question of rights. Oh, I have the right to go there. No, I have the right to go there. No, the person who gave me that right was more important than the person who gave you that right. This is getting pushed, shoved, right, negotiated in all these ways. But once you get absolute private property, what happens is those rights to game become property rights in the person. So what here might have been, competition over not quite common, but uncontrolled, semi-uncontrolled land becomes an issue of someone coming directly into something where you have all the absolute rights to the resources and taking it from you. And that you can go to court for. That's theft, right? That becomes a legal confrontation at a new level. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening at the top. These grand hunts, they are ceremonial, they are demonstrations of your power as a landowner, well, not necessarily an owner, but someone who has control of a lot of land is high on the hierarchy of rights. Okay, now we're going to go to all the rest of us because there's always more of all the rest of us, and that begins to look, we'll do the boar first, I'm sorry. Because if you thought it was dangerous chasing down 1,000-pound, right, elk and knifing him while he's engulfed by enraged mastiffs who are biting whatever shows up in front of them, including maybe your arms and legs, you could also be hunting wild boar. Now these are big. Again, these aren't, bigger, maybe not as big as some of our mega hogs that we have, but they are big, they are fast, and they have, right, enormous tusks. And so again, this is a medieval portrayal. Think of it as a National Geographic picture with certain things depicted of, on the one hand, salacious, on the other hand, natural history interest. In this series of miniatures that in this manuscript, almost every one of them must have copulating animals in it. So we're not the first people to, have that kind of stuff in our media. So here is one way that you deal with boars. You put a snare up, right? See the fence? Right, to lead the animal through the snare. Here he's been snared. He's really angry. And now you get up close to him and spear him, hoping that the cordage holds, hoping that the cross brace holds, and that you tied good knots. Because if he gets loose, he will rip you to shreds. So again, you can see as well, this person is not an average man from his outfit, right? The elite outfit, the short tunic rather than the long peasant's shirt, the type of footwear, and see, he's carrying a rapier. This is also a mark of someone in the elite at that time. And then this is a dog hunt, culminating with, see, this dog is holding the boar, right, has grabbed onto the fur or on an ear and holding him so that he can be speared. Now, one measure of the aggressiveness of the boars, you see the spears have crossbars on them. That's because boars don't care if you spear them. They will continue to try and kill you long after you have driven a spear into their vital organs or all the way through them. And so if you have a smooth spear, and those books are the boar, and I spear the boar comes up the spear and continues to root me into pieces with his sharp tusks. So you have to have a crossbar to stop the boar at a certain distance, you know, the spear penetrating enough to get to vital organs. But still, I would say a rather thrilling experience. Just to put this in perspective, across the United States today, you know, feral hog hunting has become a very big sport because feral hogs have exploded all over the South in particular. There are spear hunts. They're back to the crossbars. And then again, if you are particularly interested in high-risk behaviors, they are hunting them with medieval hunting knives, where your dogs stretch out and you lift the animal's leg and then thrust down into the heart. And again, you have to have a lot of faith in your dogs and be very nimble on your feet to get out of that kind of interaction. So one thing in the study of medieval and Renaissance hunting now, that hunting is not something that everyone does, everyone has some sense of, is there's a lot of investigation into what does this mean about people's ideas of relationship to the environment and to animals. And in the medieval and Renaissance elite, this is seen as, in some cases, actually referred to as a minor war, and it's seen as training for combat, because there's no other situation in which you are going to be spearing something large that wants to hurt you other than in war. There's nothing else that's going to terrify you at that level other than confrontation in war. So this is also seen sometimes, again, in modern study of the medieval period as a substitute. The opportunities for internecine bloody conflict between members of the elite is ending. Right? I can't just go out and spear the cousin of the neighboring landlord anymore. Life used to be good, but you know, yeah, it's just people get a little upset. But I can go out and spear a boar. I can go out and everyone in the neighborhood who counts can see me vault from my horse, draw my sword, grab the stag by its, you know, horns and stab it to death. They know who not to mess with. They know who is the real leader in that age group of men. So again, very, very dense social things going on with all of this. So again, sorry that I jumped ahead to all the rest of us, but I had to get the boars in there. You know, have to have the boars. So now we go to less dangerous animals. We go to the hare. This takes a little explanation. Again, if you look, you'll find, I think you'll find the hares doing their thing in there as well. But what you have here, it's often confused with rabbits. We will have rabbits in a moment. Hares are a different animal. First of all, they're large. A hare stretched out, if you stretched him out after you hunted him from back legs to forelegs, is about that long. The closest thing we have in the United States is a jackrabbit. If you've ever been out west, that jackrabbit is a hare, not a rabbit. Hares do not burrow. Hares build forms. They actually look like tiny deer nests, like tiny deer bedding spots. They sort of trample out the grass. Sometimes they'll gather it. They have their babies in little ground nests like that. And they are wild, very important to the calculation here, and they're pests because they love to get into the grain and eat the grain as it becomes ripe. Right? So they're pests and they're wild. Okay? That means that common people, most elite people aren't going to be interested in this. But because they're pests and because they're wild, ergo nobody truly owns them, it's a question of rights. In England, at least, common people are not censured for hunting these animals. And again, it's a big animal. And you kill a couple of these, you've got a good meal for a large number of people if you make a stew or something out of it. And then so different ways of getting them. Very common to drive them. See, it's a grain field. They're driving the grain field. They've got the nets set up. And here is a line with bells. And they're walking down the field shaking the bell line and forcing them, right? They're running and they're going to get caught in the nets and then dispatched for food. But look at the people, right? They're not wearing rapiers. They're not wearing fancy clothes, right? These are the local people. And to some degree, you might say they're controlling pests, but they're also, right, having sport. They're also, again, proving what they're able to do, their knowledge of their environment, if you will. And then you've got rabbits. Now, why are hares okay, but rabbits are theft? Because rabbits are introduced to England. They're not native to England. Some people say they were introduced at the time of William the Conqueror. It's very, very difficult to tell. Everybody wants to blame things on William. Probably there is a lot to blame, but nonetheless, he did not, absolutely destroy England. Though I'm not quite sure, being a little sympathetic to the Saxon point of view. Maybe even more to the Briton point of view, but that's something else again. It's all downhill since the Celts got driven to the edge. Anyhow, they are introduced, and they do, right? These are our familiar rabbits. They burrow, they live in colonies, and they are cultivated as a cash crop. They live in established warrens. Now, this is a little weird for us because, again, it gets into this medieval idea of what space is, how do you control it? We think of, say, if someone told you, I'm going to go to a chicken house, what would you envision? Well, a big tin house full of chickens, right? If someone said, I'm going to go to where they raise rabbits commercially, we would expect the same thing. But in fact, what they do in medieval and then Renaissance England is they establish these colonies, and because they are colony animals, they stay together. There are no fences. There's no, literal control of the space. It's just a rabbit warren. It's where the rabbits live. Of course, that means they are private property. They are harvested as, well, again, let's not misuse that because I'm trying to separate the private property world from the world of rights. These are subject to the exclusive right of a person that's on that land. So that person is allowed to harvest them, sell them. Rabbit fur is very important in the medieval and Renaissance England because it can be processed to look like much more expensive fur. So this is a real source of income. The work on the income rolls of estates show that the rabbit warrens are big sources of income. But taking them is stealing. So snaring rabbits illegally or doing this, unless you are the right holder, is a punishable offense. Now, remember, we're long before firearms, and so all kinds of things that are unfamiliar to us are being done. This is ferreting, still done in Britain today. Here is the ferret, right? They're not just cute things that people have for pets. They're vicious little weasels that attack things and terrify small animals. So you put a vicious little weasel in the hole here. You cover the rest, plug the holes, and leave only a couple open and put nets over them. And the terrified rabbits run out of the holes and go into the nets. In later iterations, you use terriers outside the holes, right? So the terriers attack the rabbits when they come out and kill them. So again, this is an interesting print because these are women who, and there's no information about whether they are legitimately ferreting these rabbits or are they stealing them. But the only odd thing here, which puts this in a little bit in suspicion, is this frame. More commonly, a loose net, like a round net, would be pinned down over the hole. But it may be that that was practice, and so you could move from hole to hole more effectively. I'm not sure on that one. So, right, hares, okay. Snaring, shooting. Right here again, this is a hare in the grain, also with rabbits. And so in this case, right, you get out this complex piece of technology, the bent stick, and a blunt arrow, and you nail them, right? And so this gets into issues that we're dealing with still today in the United States. Who gets to have projectile weapons? Who gets to use them under what circumstances? This is a medieval short bow rather than the long bow. This was seen as a hunting weapon, maybe even a lower class person's hunting weapon, but the iconography is a little hard to interpret on that. But these kinds of blunt tips were used for birds and for small animals, particularly for hares and rabbits. So controlling pests, having some sport, getting some food, and flying below the level of I'm violating rights that could get me in a lot of trouble. Now, that said, these same people are poaching deer because it's a small step from here to a big pointy broadhead and a very silent walk in the woods on a misty morning. And again, remember, this is a world before guns. None of these make any noise. So if you're out there with your trusty crossbow and you get up within 15 or 25 yards of the deer, all you hear is poof. Right? That's all the sound there is. And then if you made a good shot, you simply wait, trail the deer, and then unless someone can track the body parts back to you, you're home free. And there's some recent archaeology in England where they found abandoned wells, an abandoned well with lots of shank bones from deer, because there's no meat on them, right? So they're clearly cutting off the shank bones and other parts that they weren't going to use and throwing them in this abandoned well as a well-known place to get rid of the evidence. This is serious enough that the poaching income or poaching animal, the deer stealing both by common people and by elites, fuel vast markets of what they would call in Africa these days bushmeat, right? Probably illegally hunted game. In fact, the marketplaces forbid the sale of game, but still hundreds of animals are coming in every week from all over the country. They're being sold, they're being exchanged. And there are taverns or public houses well known all through the countryside that are receiving houses. It's part of a very big economic network as well. You're not just thumbing your nose at your neighbor, right, if you kill a bunch of his deer. You also may be making a lot of money. And if you're a peasant, you may be augmenting your income, not just by feeding your family, but by moving this into that network. Now here, because I owned a spaniel for many years, and as one of the first references to spaniels in English says, they marketh their masters well. He was my best friend. This is the kind of dog that you might expect more, I think, that man with the hares and the bow would have. Because the hounds are all very specialized. And also they send one message: I'm going to be poaching. Right? Now you can run hares and rabbits with a small hound, beagle, something like that. But see, a spaniel will flush birds into a net. It will scare rabbits and hares into a net, right? But it's not seen as threatening because they won't work in a pack, right? They make too much noise. They quest back and forth, right? They won't run a line in the same way that hounds do unless they're on their own. My spaniel actually would run rabbits in a circle. He would trail them and bring them around. But so this again, one of these pictures, and of course, you got the little puppies there feeding away. These miniatures are really wonderful sources. And then part of what they're doing is just simply trying to stay alive at the common level. Here you can see, for those of you who are not exposed throughout your childhood to the ways of pre-industrial farming, this field has been plowed, and now it's being harrowed to put the seed, mix the seed in, right? So this man is leading the horse, pulling the harrow here, and of course there's all this seed, so the crows are coming to feed, and so you have this complicated device, right, which is a sling. This is a replica of a Balearic sling. The people of the Balearic Islands, probably the most famous slingers of the classical world. And you can still go to Mallorca, I think it is, for the international slinging competition every year. This is what David pegged Goliath with, right? It's simply just a weight, right, with strings. And so they are used all over for bird hunting, for simply chasing birds away. And can you stop anyone making those? Can you regulate, two strings, a little patch of leather, and a rock? You can't stop people making these. You can't stop people using them. In medieval Europe, and Renaissance Europe, they also used blowguns with clay pellets for bird hunting and bird repelling. So this interaction with animals that includes scaring them, killing them, skinning them, eating them, this is, I would say it's integral to the larger life of humans in this period. For example, today, well, silly thing, but I taught for a year out in Grand Junction, Colorado, and one of the professors had a desert survival course. This became controversial for the reason that you'll understand in a moment. If you were going to survive in the desert and you had lost everything, you were going to need to kill animals and make them edible. So he would arrive at the camp out part of the class with a crate of chickens, live chickens. And each student got a chicken, and the chicken had to become dinner. You had to kill the chicken, somehow get the feathers or skin off, gut it out, and cook it. And some of the students objected, oh my gosh, we're killing chickens, this is so horrible. I think even the local PETA chapter got involved, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And I was very proud of our vice president for academic affairs because they confronted him about this. And he said this wonderful thing. He said, do you think all those chickens packed up in Walmart committed suicide? Right? How did they get there? At what point are you going to accept that this is your relationship to animals, to nature? So controlling pests. And then here we'll see if you can come up afterwards and I can show you these things. Right, these are, again, these short bows that are typically used for hunting by common people throughout Europe. Here, this fellow's a very, very good shot, right? He's got a couple of ducks under his belt. And one of the reasons that that kind of bow appears to have been tolerated more is that it is, rather than these, as you can see, this is a 6-foot long longbow. It's not a very strong one because, we use it at the Renaissance Fair. People aren't ready to pull a 60 to 100-pound longbow back. But understand the average man was this tall, was maybe 5'6". So this was 6 inches longer than he was tall, so that you could get an immense amount of power into it. And that was the model for the military bow that people were using. So that's a weapon. But a short bow is maybe 5 feet long, maybe 5.5 feet long, much shorter. And it's a short range, right? Shoot a blunt arrow, get a bird, get a rabbit. You could get a deer, right? But not at the same distance or with the same sureness that you could with a longbow. So again, all of these things nested into their experience. This is what the, again, common man, right? Bare legs, right? Or moccasin type footwear, wearing nothing but that shirt. And what do you wear under your kilt? Right? That's what's under the shirt. This is, by the way, the unified undergarment all over Europe for this time. This is the women's undergarment. This is the men's undergarment. They are in their undershirts. Right? Later on, colder weather, they might layer things on. And the hose, right, what we think of as then hose turning into pants, really are stockings. That's why they're hose. They're leggings. And there's nothing concealing, let's just say, the more intimate parts of your body. You just pull up long tubes of warm stuff, strap it to a belt to keep your legs warm or protected. But here, they're really poor. They don't even have that, but they do have their short bows and their arrows, and they are capturing their share of the animal world. And then here, again, we've got a illustration of slinging. This is, you got to love these old artists. He clearly had never slung before. It can't work that way to have it on those 2 fingers. You have to have one loop here, and then you have to be able to release the knot. In any case, not to be trifled with, I would say that the sling stone leaves the sling at maybe 90 to 100 miles an hour. So a 3 to 4 ounce stone, think about someone, we're at the end of the baseball season, but think about what it looks like when someone's beamed with a fastball in a major league game. That's like these are even more deadly. So you can get very accurate with them. But one thing I would like to mention here that shows up very, very, very little, though it does show up in the famous book that Dr. Burton and I have been discussing lately, Gaston Phoebus, Le Livre de Chasse. The last chapters are about trapping and netting of animals. All of these things that are familiar to us are grossly inefficient, other than maybe ferreting and driving hares into the net, because it's really easy to miss. And the goal is not to miss, the goal is to kill animals. And so if you go a little bit deeper, there's a world of snaring, of traditional traps of all different kinds, particularly when you move into the world of fish. A lot of passive fish traps that are incredibly important to the economy. So where do we end up with all of this? Well, we go home with Peter Bruegel the Elder after a long hunt, coming out of the snow with the animals assembled from the village. And why do you think they thought it was okay to do that? because it's their village and they've been there time out of mind? Are they going to ask anybody's permission? No. If the Lord's representative comes and says, "What have you been hunting?" They might just say, "Yeah, and what business is it of yours?" Right? Can you prove that we killed a deer? We were out after hare, right? Can you find any rabbit feet around here? No, you can't, right? Because this is our space. And I'll leave you with this expression from the experience of Russian serfs. Russia did not emancipate chattel serfs until 1861, so about the same time that we did in the United States. And Russian serfs contemplating their bondage, and so if we go back to, say, 1000 or 1200, many of these people we're talking about are bond people. They are under bondage. By 1500, that's pretty much gone in Western and most of Central Europe. But the Russian peasants would say, "We belong to you, but the land belongs to us. Right? You own my body, but I have an intrinsic and unbreakable right to whatever comes off this land." And I think that's a very good way to end this when we talk about common people's participation in this life and economy. So thank you very much. I'm willing to answer any questions that people have.